Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, When One Size Does Not Fit All, Addressing Issues Throughout an SBIRT Project Lifecycle. I'm Tracy McPherson, and I'm going to be your webinar moderator today. I am a Senior Research Scientist in the Public Health Department at NORC at the University of Chicago. I provided my contact information here in case you have any questions about this webinar, other webinars that the BIG Initiative has put out as part of this webinar series, or any other questions you might have about implementation of SBIRT in your settings. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'm glad to set up a technical assistance call and see how we might be able to help you. Today's webinar is produced in partnership with the Brief Intervention Group for the BIG Initiative at NORC at the University of Chicago, in partnership with the National SBIRT ATTC, funded by SAMHSA. You can learn more information about the partnership and the webinars and all of the resources that we offer together at sbirteducation.com. You can also link from there to the National SBIRT ATTC website. This webinar is part of our 2017 SBIRT webinar series. As you can see, we launched it in January, and we have webinars running through June. So I hope you'll take advantage not only of signing up for our future webinars coming up in April and on into May and June, but also take advantage of the on-demand learning that's now available. So all of the webinars you see here are actually available 24/7, and you can link to those from the hospitalsbirt.webs.com website. There's a webinars tab. You are welcome to access this anytime. We do hope that you will share the opportunities with your colleagues. You can also download a flyer about the webinar series there as well. So we really hope to see you on future webinars. We do hope you'll take advantage of the education that's provided to you and available. And we do hope that we will be able to continue to work with you to bring you a series that really fits your needs. I wanted to mention to you that you should keep an eye out for communication from us. We're going to bundle some of our webinars, which we have done a little bit in the past, but not as much, and we have quite a library of resources now. So coming up, we're going to be bundling a mini-series, so to speak, on intimate partner violence. And you'll see already we've had a couple of those this year. We had some last year, and we're going to put those together for you. So keep an eye out for communication from us about that. The materials for today's webinar and also any webinar in our series are all posted on our hospitalsbirt.webs.com website. Today's webinar, you'll find the PowerPoint slides, any materials and resources that might get mentioned. If one of the speakers says, I'd like to share some additional resources with the audience, and they send those to us, we will post those there with the PowerPoint slides. You will also find the recording. So once it's made available on demand, usually within 48 hours or so, you'll be able to access that from the same page. In addition to that, you'll be able to access their certificate of completion and be able to request your continuing education credits. At the end of our webinar, you'll be able to ask questions. If you look in the upper right-hand pane of your GoToWebinar platform, you'll see there is a panel that allows you to click on the questions pane. If you have a question, whether it's the beginning of the webinar, the middle, or the end, you're welcome just to go ahead and get it into the queue, and we'll take as many questions as we possibly can at the close of our webinar. Behind the scenes today is our technical facilitator, Misty Story. If you have any questions about GoToWebinar, how to access any of the materials, she'll be facilitating responses to those questions. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenters. Our first presenter is Adrienne Lindsay, and Dr. Lindsay serves as a Senior Research Specialist for the Arizona State University Center for Applied Behavioral Health Policy, with a faculty affiliate appointments in the ASU Schools of Criminal Justice, Social Work, and Behavioral Health. Dr. Lindsay earned her doctorate in behavioral health with an emphasis in integrated care from ASU after obtaining a Master's of Arts in Psychology from Northwest University and a bachelor's degree in 2004 from the University of Washington. Dr. Lindsay is a member of the International Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, fondly referred to as MINT, and Dr. Lindsay is a subject matter expert in the areas of motivational interviewing, medication-assisted treatment, and screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment, or SBIRT. Dr. Lindsay oversees ASU's 5-discipline SBIRT student training grant, and much of Dr. Lindsay's research focuses on the implementation of evidence-based practices within interagency systems of care and interprofessional settings. Our second presenter today is Dr. Maggie. Dr. Maggie is a clinical associate professor and associate chair of internship programs with the Doctor of Behavioral Health program at Arizona State University. Dr. Maggie is currently working with research teams to develop the Practice Integration Profile, a patient-centered outcomes research institute, or PCORI, grant-funded study developing an asynchronous training program designed for providers of integrated team-based care in primary care settings, and a SAMHSA grant-funded project with the Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment Training Implementation Collaborative. Previously, Dr. Mackey administered the Home-Based Family Therapy Partnership Training Program with a research team that was supported by CMS funding through contracts with the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services and Kansas Health Solutions, a Medicaid organization. So it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Mackey, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lindsay to get us started.
Great. Thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for joining. So today we'll be walking you through what we have really seen as key milestones in our SBIRT project life cycle. So we are in our second year of a SAMHSA SBIRT student training grant. We were very ambitious when we wrote our proposal and agreed to implement SBIRT in 5 of Arizona State University's academic programs: our School of Social Work, our nursing program, our integrated behavioral health program, counseling psychology, and clinical psychology. So we'll speak to how we've really kind of had to adapt the model for each of those respective departments and their needs, hence the title, when one size does not fit all. So we won't spend much time here today, but we at least wanted to point people to some of the theories of change that have really been influencing our work. So we're really sort of using a blended model, looking at Rogers' diffusion of innovations, Proctor's implementation outcomes, and the Addiction Technology Transfer Center's tech transfer model. And we'll walk you through what we were really seeing as 4 key phases in our project's life cycle: a needs assessment, disseminating information to those who needed it, implementing our project, and sustaining our project, which really bleeds into the 3 other phases, and really, and we've really been thinking about sustainability from day one. So we'll walk through each of these phases in detail. So the first phase, the needs assessment, was really around how does SBIRT fit for us as a university, how does it fit for the 5 participating departments, and how does it look different for each of those departments, or how does it need to look a little different for each of those departments. The second phase being information dissemination: how do we get the information to the faculty that need it, to the students that need it? How do we impart that important SBIRT knowledge to all the participating parties? Our third phase really being implementation of the project. Once we've sort of gotten all the information out there, how do we continue to roll it out throughout the university? How do we determine that the innovation SBIRT is available throughout ASU? And again, lastly, sustainability. How are we going to ensure that SBIRT remains at the university beyond our short 3-year grant period. And again, sustainability is really layered over all of these phases. We've been asking ourselves about sustainability from the get-go. And of course, before the needs assessment, there was some pre-work of getting these different departments together, beginning to collaborate. Fortunately, at Arizona State University, we have a real culture of interdisciplinary education efforts, interprofessional education efforts, and that really helped to set the stage. That culture really helped to set the stage for working together. So through our time together this afternoon, we'll walk through what we really saw as core activities for each of these phases. So the first phase, again, being a needs assessment, determining how SBIRT fit for us and what this was going to look like. So we had a few key questions that we were really asking ourselves. Maybe most importantly, what does SBIRT implementation look like in pre-service education? We had a good sense of what it looked like in primary care, of what it looks like in acute care, of what it looks like in integrated care settings, but really taking a step back and saying, well, what does this need to look like at the university level? And we had begun to implement SBIRT at the university level prior to our grant. We had 2 standing SBIRT courses, but really thinking about what was it going to look like across the university as a whole. And next, thinking about what does a really comprehensive evaluation and implementation plan look like for 5 very unique academic disciplines, and how is that going to need to be a little different for each of those disciplines? And where do we maybe see similarities in some of those department needs, but then also maybe where we see some variation and for some a need for some adaptations. And lastly, how can we maybe learn from each different department's approach to SBIRT implementation? Is there something that we can take from nursing and apply that to our, say, integrated behavioral health program, or vice versa? So again, these were just sort of these key questions that we were asking ourselves that you may ask yourself if you're at this phase in your SBIRT project. So we really began our needs assessment process with establishing a council of directors. And so this council is made up of our co-investigators and the respective department heads from each of the participating disciplines. And the council has really served as a steering committee to help guide our decisions. And there's a couple different things that we address in this forum. One is the department needs, the individual department needs, but also kind of our collective needs, our larger collective needs. I probably couldn't say enough about the importance of having the department heads at the table. The clout that they have in their respective departments, the authority that they have in those departments to make kind of large-scale changes has been really critical to our ability to do things in the short grant cycle. And certainly to do things that will hopefully be sustainable, as well as getting the buy-in from their faculty. So we see this as kind of the equivalent of maybe having executives present on a community-based project on a steering committee in the community where we know that executive buy-in is so critical and the executive involvement is so critical. And so we really wanted those academic department heads at the table. After establishing our council of directors, we conducted programmatic site visits with each of the participating departments in between those council of director meetings, because we felt like we really needed to delve deeper into each of those units and what their particular needs were and how we were going to have to adapt the SBIRT model to their needs. So we had a couple important key players at the table, of course the department heads, those core faculty members that would be involved in teaching SBIRT, and of course ourselves and the rest of the implementation team. So this really provided an opportunity to delve deep into those programs. What does their student body look like? How long are students in their program? What does their internship and practicum requirements look like? What are the licensing requirements that they have to attend to? And recording these site visits and transcribing these site visits so we could really keep all the intricacies of each of the departments clear in our minds. And I could say we've regularly revisited those notes to ensure we're understanding the unique needs and differences between the departments, but also going out and making multiple visits and having that face time with really our stakeholders within each of those departments. Another critical activity during our needs assessment process was just the mere act of establishing a common language. We found that we were all kind of speaking our own language, our own discipline-specific language, and that made it challenging to communicate. So we realized with time that oftentimes we were using different names but talking about the same function. So was a field instructor in social work, for instance, similar to maybe a preceptor in our nursing program, and finding those overlaps in functions despite maybe having different names or terms. So we created this crosswalk of these different terms. We distributed this to our Council of Directors, and we distributed it to the participating faculty, as well as posted this on our program website so that we really could have an understanding of the other disciplines' language and begin to better communicate and understand each other's programs. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Mackey at this point, and he'll walk us through how we began to disseminate SBIRT knowledge amongst these departments.
Great, thank you, Adrian. So in phase 2, the information dissemination phase, really as we progressed into this phase after having a sense of the needs, we asked, again, some key questions as we were beginning to think about what we needed to do next in this process. So the first one was really about how we were going to provide the resources that were necessary. So, you know, what was going to be the means of communication that would enable people to access the useful training resources they needed. The next was how often we should actually engage in that kind of communication. And that was the main question because oftentimes as everyone recognizes being involved with a project, there are a lot of moving parts. And so how can we organize that so that people don't get inundated by just a series of emails, but a variety of ways that really brings the information together in a usable fashion and does so that draws attention when it is disseminated and provides clear direction for those who receive it. We also were thinking at this dissemination phase that we wanted to make sure that whatever plan we put in place and how we executed that it would really maximize the reach and accessibility of the training. Because we have students in 5 different programs, some of which are on ground, others are online, and some are hybrid, both on ground and online. We had to consider ways in which we were going to be working with those programs, but also later how students would be engaged in ways that they could access that information. And finally, we were thinking about how we were going to achieve the SBIRT learning, especially to those fully online. For instance, the behavioral health program has students all over the United States and also in different countries. And so the mere geographic distance and the disconnection of students by time and space meant that we had to think about this, not only synchronicity, but also we had to think of asynchronous means of engaging those involved. So the first thing we thought about quite early on, which is what many programs, projects do, is to build an infrastructure, because part of good communication is provided a useful place that gives enough information, but also that is updated over time. It also has to be a place that can be an archive, so that when you have faculty that rotate in and out of programs, we need to also build an infrastructure that would really ramp them up into the project as quickly and easily as possible, and we would need to do that by providing them information that was accessible to them as they hit the ground. So in this website that we built, we have key components to that. One is we had various means, whether the Council of Directors or bridge means, which I'll describe in a moment. we wanted to make sure to archive those minutes, as well as descriptions of what those meetings were about and our objectives for each one. We also wanted to create a section for each of the academic units so that they had an identity within the site, so it wasn't just a project identity, but it was also a program identity, and really have a place for them to upload information that was unique to them that they could access, but at the same time that the other programs could see what that program was doing and have access to that information. Finally, we had a course content area, so as programs were building out courses, that they had all the necessary elements to developing that course, from syllabus design and development to rubrics. If they needed information about particular content areas, if they needed screening tools, those are examples of things that courses, faculty leading courses would need, and so we provided that area. And finally, of course, we had information about other nationally recognized and accessible resources that we have links to as well. I should say one comment on the bottom is we have surveys and reports. That's really for our purpose in collecting information along the way and archiving that as the project progresses. So other key stakeholders are able to access that, but we also keep it there for our own purpose. So it has a multi-layer purpose and also application for each stakeholder that's involved in the project. So we had the Council of Directors meetings. That's the key leaders of each program. We also had what we were bridge meetings. We decided early on that we were going to design this concept of a bridge meeting, and we began by saying, well, what should we call it so it has a sense of purpose and direction just by nature of the name. And so bridge, standing for building resources and interconnections to disseminate and gain expertise, is the name that we gave these meetings. These meetings were intended to be interdisciplinary in nature and really to be a place where the various programs and faculty could learn more about each other, could share resources with each other, could collaborate on various ways that they were implementing SBIRT within their programs and learn from each other through that process, and then also to solicit feedback. So as we were getting feedback from the Council of Directors, we are also have continued to get feedback during those bridge meetings from those key stakeholders that have been involved. Those stakeholders have been faculty, we've even had students, and others who are related to the clinics where the students are working, all involved in the various types of bridge meetings. The bridge meetings, really the goal, the couple of goals that we had for those is to support this infusion of SBIRT in each of the programs as well as in the practice-related sites. We wanted to be sure that as the sites were infusing this into their program, that the curriculum, the policies, the practices of each of those programs was taking shape to support it. Again, with the expectation that we were achieving the sustainability objective of the overall project. And then we also wanted to ensure that students received an adequate dose and opportunity to practice SBIRT within the curriculum and within their practice opportunities or application opportunities. The objectives for the bridge meetings were really, we took time to train faculty because varying faculty had differing levels of exposure to SBIRT prior to the project. Some had not heard of it, some had heard of it but really were unsure, and then others on the other end of the spectrum were quite aware and had actually used it in practice and taught their students the practice of SBIRT. So we had a wide range, and we wanted to bring everybody up to speed so that we had them all fully informed and ready to begin to redesign their programs to infuse SBIRT. We also took that time to share resources, and so of course what we did is we drove people back to the website and provide them examples during the meetings to show them what was available and also where they could find it on their own, so they didn't have to necessarily rely on us to get examples of, like I said, the syllabi, the how to design a learning objective, how to design a rubric. They could actually go and go to the website. We've also encouraged, during those meetings, we've encouraged each of the various departmental representatives to share on the website their PowerPoints and other articles and resources that they had found, and encouraged each other to look at the various lists and to share freely and to use freely and to communicate with each other beyond the bridge meeting time when they had questions, would like to explore ways in which that person had implemented that information into their course. We encourage them to communicate with each other about that and really learn from each other through that process. We developed an email newsletter, and the purpose of this newsletter was to really highlight and prompt stakeholder continued engagement in the project. So we communicated project timeline, tasks, and deadlines, updates on upcoming initiatives, and also provides an opportunity to forecast next steps. So each time someone receives this on a periodic basis, they then have an update, current status basically, as well as links to various parts of the website that provides either more information or resources or other details that they're going to need in order to pursue those various issues. Now, in light of this idea of if we're going to disseminate information to people throughout the globe, then we also had to think about ways as that being our bar and decision making as to how we would provide access to training tools as well. We wanted to make sure that a student in South Korea who had access to the same tool as one in our backyard in Arizona. So we looked at and reviewed those training materials that are available, of course, ATTC's Foundations course, but also we've explored and used Cognito, the avatar patient simulation platform, that really enables students to use that platform to engage in a role play, a technology-based role play with avatar provider and patient engaging with each other in communication. It provides a decision tree type of engagement, and that allowed students to really try on the types of skills they were learning in whether it was the ATTC course or in their program course. They were able to use this Cognito to try out those skills and then see the patient responses as feedback to how those skills were working. Also, the use of motivational interviewing is involved with Cognito, but also students given the patient simulation real-time feedback on those skills specifically related to MI, so that they could see that they had a foundational skill with patients and/or clients in a variety of settings.
Okay, thanks, CR. So next we'll walk you through how we implemented the project. CR spoke to how we first worked to disseminate the information and create those different channels to continually disseminate that information, but then we'll really speak to where we focused our implementation efforts. So in this phase, the key questions that we were asking ourselves were really, how do we achieve the greatest student exposure to the SBIRT model? We may not be able to reach all university students, but how do we achieve the greatest student exposure within those participating disciplines? And also, how can we maximize classroom learning, both in on-the-ground courses and online courses? And CR spoke earlier to the issue of dosage and wanting to ensure that students have enough exposure that they feel comfortable in the model. And also, how can we create some practice-based, clinic-based experiences where students can practice the skills in a real-world setting? And what resources we had available to us to support both student and faculty skill development. So this image really depicts how we were envisioning SBIRT would be implemented and would spread across our university system. So here we really felt we were looking at what we might call facilitated dissemination through our SBIRT champions. So starting with sort of our level 1 champions, we might call them, our council of directors, really being kind of those core champions and championing SBIRT with their faculty, and spreading from the faculty out to the practicum and internship supervisors, primarily on our at our on-campus clinics, and I'll speak to that in a moment. And then lastly, with our graduates, as they go out into the community, as they practice in the community post-graduation, can they help to continue to just spread the innovation through our local community, but also whatever communities they go to post-graduation. In terms of our course Infusion, we wanted to really have a multi-level approach and hit the SBIRT implementation at various levels of our curricula. Looking first at our existing required courses so that we can, again, hit the greatest number of students, but also looking at our existing course electives, because we maybe have a little more leeway there in terms of making content changes and inserting, say, a few modules around SBIRT. And so our focus was primarily around infusing existing required courses and infusing existing electives with SBIRT content, rather than developing entirely new courses, as most of these clinical disciplines were already really stretched. They had many courses, many years of courses, lots of licensing requirements to attend to, and most felt it really wasn't going to be feasible to roll out, say, a whole new course. So kind of working with what we already had in front of us and making some adaptations. We also look to infuse SBIRT into what are called the Objective Structured Clinical Exams, or OSCEs. If you're not familiar with the OSCE model, it's essentially an interaction between a student and a patient actor, and those students in this case, in the case of our SBIRT project, would implement the SBIRT screen, or would administer the SBIRT screen and provide that brief intervention to the patient actor. And we have a unique model at ASU where our nursing students and social work students have a combined OSCE where the nurse can actually provide a warm handoff to that social work student. And we're looking to implement the OSCE model in our behavioral health program as well. Because that's a fully online program, that would probably include a patient-actor interaction via web versus in person in a mock clinic. But we are looking to expand to our behavioral health program. We've also worked to informally cross-list some courses, and I say informally because the formal process, as those of you in academia probably know, at least in our case, takes oftentimes a year and a half to officially cross-list a course across different departments, particularly when those departments are in different colleges. So we found sort of a workaround, which was to take our existing online SBIRT course and open that up as an elective to all the other participating disciplines. And because it was an online course, we had a little bit higher enrollment caps to work with, so we really had the space to allow some of those other disciplines to register for those courses, with their respective programs permitting those students to use those courses as electives. And that also provided some nice interdisciplinary conversation within those courses, which is, of course, what we're striving towards with SBIRT and integrated care. We've also looked to implement SBIRT into our master syllabi. So some of our departments work with master syllabi where there is a lead instructor, a master syllabus, and various adjunct faculty would be utilizing that master syllabus and adhering to that master syllabus. And so we felt that this really worked towards our goal of sustainability. Can we get those SBIRT learning objectives inserted into those master syllabi? Can we get the SBIRT literature built into those master syllabi, and hopefully 1 or 2 units on SBIRT within those courses? And lastly, we utilized our internship consultation groups. So our integrated behavioral health program is a fully online program. Those students are licensed providers. So oftentimes in their internship settings, they're not receiving maybe traditional clinical supervision. So what they do instead is work with an ASU staff person, a faculty member who runs an internship consultation group, and they consult with one another kind of in a clinical supervision, group supervision type format. And so we wanted to utilize that space and that function to allow students to present SBIRT cases, to troubleshoot SBIRT implementation issues. So again, really kind of trying to hit our curricula from a number of different directions so that we can maximize the number of students that are exposed, but also have students exposed at various points in their program. We've also chosen to focus on our campus-based clinics, our on-campus clinics. We have 5 on-campus clinics that are currently participating and several others that we're hoping to bring in as time goes on. These are health and behavioral health focused clinics, and our focus here, our purpose here is really kind of trifold. To, one, have those on-campus clinics, which are really kind of training centers, to serve as an SBIRT training site for our university students, for internship and practicum students who are practicing at those clinics, but also to expose the clinic clients to SBIRT services, with those clinic clients sometimes being university students, faculty, and other times being community-based clients. But maybe most importantly, to adhere to our sustainability goals. There was kind of a resounding opinion of the Council of Directors that we don't have a lot of control over those community-based clinics, even those that we have an existing internship or practicum relationship with. That sometimes even just getting that site established as an internship or practicum site can be challenging, and retaining it can be challenging, and that we wouldn't have as much leverage as we might hope in terms of getting them to implement SBIRT. So could we instead focus on our on-campus clinics, where we have a lot more maybe quality control, we might say, and where we can hopefully sustain that and build a really solid model to where when we want to bring in a community-based clinic, we've already done it in-house and can speak to how it might best be done at their site, or at least have a model to present to them. And lastly, looking at those clinic tools and resources that we wanted to make available to both students and faculty. So we developed readiness rulers, both motivational interviewing readiness rulers and SBIRT readiness rulers. We have a screenshot here of one side of our motivational interviewing readiness ruler. Our SBIRT ruler has a little more information, standard drink sizes, low-risk drinking limits, things of that sort. So making these available both to the students and faculty, but also making validated screening tools available to them, ensuring those are up on the program website, ensuring that they're utilizing appropriate validated SBIRT screening tools. We spoke a minute ago to the internship consultation group process, but also looking at our student tracking systems, our student internship tracking systems, or our student databases. Students in several programs report their internship activities into an electronic database, and we wanted to incorporate SBIRT into those databases to where the students see that we value the SBIRT intervention, and we want them to be attending to that and be thinking about universally screening their clients and patients. And we also felt that their behavior might be influenced by the presence of that SBIRT screen within those reporting mechanisms. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Mackey to walk us through our sustainability efforts.
Dr. Mackey, you're on mute.
As we've suggested several times, sustainability really began on day one. And so even though this appears as the fourth phase, it really began earlier, and it becomes the, by implementing it earlier and infusing it throughout all that we did along the way, it becomes phase 4, in that our main objective is that when the grant ends, that all that we have put into place in each of the programs and also the collaborations among the programs, that all of that will continue on beyond the grant period. So we were asking main questions that kind of guided us in answering or addressing that objective, and that is, what are the critical components of the initiative? In other words, what should continue? What will support the continued collaborations? In other words, is the simple fact of having grant dollars in a specific project what's bringing people together, or can we explore really much broader benefits and investments of each of the key stakeholders that would really last well beyond the period? How can we institutionalize SBIRT so that it isn't simply a practice, but there are various components within each of the departments, within the courses, within the departmental policies and procedures that would have this component of their curriculum as part of the identity of that program. And so the main question that we asked over and over again is that sustainable? So if we looked at one component of our project, we were always going back to that question. Is this something that would continue to occur once we either focused on something else within the project, or once the grant-funded team was no longer involved with these programs in our existing capacity. So we really came to this idea of thinking about curriculum and clinic sustainability as two key areas and ways to accomplish that. So we've looked at each of the syllabi. We've asked each of the programs to look at each of their courses and identify which courses they were going to infuse the SBIRT principles, ideas, and practices, and actually redesign their syllabi from the objectives to the descriptions to the assignments to the rubrics used to assess those assignments, that SBIRT was built into each of those components, so it became part of the course, and it became infused throughout the course rather than simply a separate assignment that could be dropped later. We also looked at the on-campus clinic policies and procedures, as Adrian mentioned a moment ago, and some of the key directors of the on-campus clinics began to consider ways to actually place appropriate SBIRT practices and available screening items from the audit or the DAST right into their intake forms. So it became a part of their form rather than a separate screen. By infusing or incorporating rather the fields within the tracking databases, they become hardwired into those tracking databases so that the policies, procedures, as well as the infrastructure that supports carrying those out all work together to sustain the use of SBIRT and the continued training of SBIRT in each aspect of these programs. And finally, the program website, which we have begun conversations now in year 2 of thinking about how the website that I showed you a few moments ago would, we're going to develop a process by which that would be continually updated, would be managed by a collaboration of the various programs, and we'll be nailing down the specifics of that in the next few months coming up. So that's what we have for you today, and we appreciate your having us speak about our project, which we're excited about, which we've learned a lot about, and so we're open to questions if you've got them for us.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dr. Mackey and Dr. Lindsay. We really appreciate you sharing your experiences across across the full life cycle. A lot of trying to really highlight some of the key experiences you've had, some of the strategies, what's been particularly a facilitator in your process. And so I think there are a lot of folks who can really benefit from learning from the experiences you've had. We do have several questions, and I'd like to ask you about the resources that you've developed and how available those are. Are those accessible? There was a lovely website that you showed in the beginning. It had, I don't know if that's an internal only kind of website. Maybe you have a sort of a public-facing website that has some of the resources that you were talking about. You showed the ruler. Maybe there are other things that other people could benefit from so they don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So currently our website is not open to the public, although we'll probably look at making many of those items public as we move into our final year. We might not make the existing page public currently just because a lot of the faculty have agreed to share their curricula there, so I think we'd need to go back to everyone and get their permission if those are things they really want to be shared publicly. But that being said, we would be happy to share a number of resources if people want to reach out to us. We've developed SBIRT learning objectives, grading rubrics for various assignments like SBIRT case studies, SBIRT video recorded role plays. So we're happy to share much of that. Our initial SBIRT course is taught by myself, which is in Dr. Mackey's home unit of our behavioral health program, and we started that course back in 2012, so it's been running for several years now, and we've built up a lot of resources from that course. So we'd be happy to share many of those resources, including our readiness rulers and things like that. So if you have specific needs, certainly feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to share those. And then I would say many of the resources that we utilize, we can thank former SBIRT grantees for, whether it's SBIRT Colorado or SBIRT Oregon. So really trying not to reinvent the wheel every time, but using what was already in the public domain as well.
Thank you. Yes, I would encourage folks to reach out if you have specific needs to Dr. Lindsay. I have found that a lot of the materials that have come out of the SAMHSA grants have been really, really useful, and folks have been really kind to share and even share the templates that you use so that you can make them your own. So you may have this terrific ruler, but it has the ASU logo on it, or you have a pocket card, or you have something else. And people have been so kind to share those and then allow someone else to sort of brand it their own. And so, yes, I think it makes a lot of sense to, if you have a need and you haven't been able to find something that could be useful, maybe ASU has it. So thank you.
Sure.
I do have another question about sort of the evaluation, the research and evaluation piece of it. You know, what are some of the outcomes that you were looking, you know, to measure, to know whether the program was successful? You know, were students gaining the knowledge and the skills they needed? What kind of measures did you use, and what did you see? You know, maybe what did you discover?
Yeah, I would say, so we're kind of midway in that process. We have, of course, our required government surveys, but we've made a number of additions to those. One being a student knowledge assessment of really kind of a multi-choice mini exam of sorts to make sure that they're really grasping the core SBIRT concepts, but also some questions around self-efficacy and their comfort in utilizing SBIRT. So the hope, of course, is when they get out into the field that they feel comfortable enough, whether it's in their internship site or whether in a clinical site post-graduation, that they feel like they can really pick up the skills and run with them, or at least begin practicing with them. Dr. Mackey, do you have anything to add?
Well, one thing that I think is helpful is that the online data management systems that provide really the tool for students to submit the activities that they're involved with. I know in the integrated behavioral health program we also have a feedback mechanism of the performance metrics that reflect their use of various tools, and SBIRT being one. We're going to continue to develop that so that they get real-time feedback each week as they submit their hours. And what that does is that it also connects SBIRT with the other aspects of their training, the various types of skills that they're learning, so that they could see their use of SBIRT in a broader context. So that would be another way that we're developing it. I did want to add a comment, though. The first question was about would we share resources. I'd like to have it a two-way street, because if others use this framework that we've suggested today of the 4 phases, we'd love to hear back from you about if you're along the way in one of those phases, if it makes sense to you. Does that framework apply? Are you seeing gaps? Or are you seeing things within each phase, things that we may not have mentioned? I think this is could be a helpful framework for others who are going to receive funding sometime down the road, and to be able to have this framework up front would, I think, be helpful. We could refine it together.
Absolutely. That two-way street, you know, really resonates with me very, very much, and I encourage folks to share information and help support each other. And I personally, I loved how you laid it out. I was fascinated by how you pulled in frameworks, CFIR, diffusion theory, just how you were pulling things in across models. And that I find implementation science models be particularly helpful in organizing your thinking and organizing the data that you collect. But I really liked how you pulled things together to customize it, because I always find that one model is not, it doesn't completely fit what we're doing when we're implementing SBIRT necessarily. So I was particularly intrigued by that, and I think others will too. And I really hope that folks will reach out to ASU and share what they're doing. So thank you for saying that and prompting people to do that.
Absolutely.
And Tracy, can I mention one other thing around the research outcomes I neglected to mention that people might be interested in? We're running a small pilot study in our in our more robust SBIRT course, which is a full 3-credit SBIRT course, and that's the one that's been running the longest, really. And so what we've done is we've taken the students in that course and randomized them to 2 groups, one just kind of engaging in the more typical online didactic training, and the other half of the class being exposed to an SBIRT patient simulation and looking at the impact on their course assignments, particularly their final assignment, which is a video recorded role play of an entire SBIRT intervention from start to finish. And so that pilot study is still in process. We have about 60 students in the study currently. We're hoping to have maybe 100, 150 by the close of the grant, but we may have more to share down the road on that.
Oh, thank you for adding that, and I hope both of you and the folks that are attending today, as they're thinking about their research and their evaluation, and it's getting it out and really sharing what you find, whether it's in a presentation or a paper or a brief report. I think we all in this space are looking to understand, how did you evaluate it? What did you discover? What did you learn from that? And if we could do more sharing of that experience, I think we would all benefit. So I look forward to seeing what you report out. So it's good to hear. I want to remind everyone to submit your questions. We don't have that many questions, but I'm going to give you a couple. Just to remind you to use your questions pane. Go ahead and type those in. And I see one has popped up here. Let's see. So the question is, did you happen to create any supervision or coaching checklists?
Do you want to speak to that, CR, or I can?
Go ahead and speak to that. I'm thinking about our...
Yeah, we haven't. We played around with the idea of using some that were already in the public domain, like the BNI checklists. We did receive a lot, I don't want to say pushback because that's too strong of a word, but we had concerns from our stakeholders of the feasibility and the burden of implementing those in some of the practice sites. Now, given that we're focusing on campus clinics, we have some other means to utilize that they already have in place that they felt might be more reasonable for them. So most of the on-campus clinics have the means to observe the students, the internship students and practicum students, many through recording mechanisms. So they will really be observing the students' SBIRT activities that way, but we have toyed with that, yes, but burden was the concern again from the stakeholders.
Sure.
We go through a kind of a vetting process of our students, and I'm from the Integrated Behavioral Health Program, which has the students online, and so we can't actually observe them. They're in health centers all over, and sharing recordings with patients would be really impossible. So the use of Cognito, and we're exploring the use of another technology, Smart Sparrow, is going to provide us a way to really engage them in role-playing. And then Cognito has built in a somewhat of a rubric. The Smart Sparrow, we would be building our own rubric, but we're just not there yet.
Okay, thank you. There's another related question to supervision, and I don't know if this addresses this person's question and what you just shared with us. I think this might be a little bit broader. In the application or integration of SBIRT, how is supervision presented?
So, do you know a little bit more about that question? I'm trying to understand it, and I'd love to answer it, but I'm not quite sure which direction to go.
Sure. Yeah. Kenneth, this is your question, and if you would like to add a little additional context, that would be great. I'm going to take another question while we ask Kenneth to do that. This question is, how many staff are devoted to this SBIRT project?
Yeah, that's a great question. Myself and Dr. Mackey are heading up our implementation team, and we have an evaluator, and we also have 2 co-PIs. and then a representative from each of the 5 department heads. And then, you know, certain faculty involved at certain periods. So, you know, if we were to include all the faculty that are teaching SBIRT, gosh, you know, 20, 25 people maybe across those 5 disciplines and across the campus clinics. So our core smaller group is, you know, closer to 10-ish, but including all the teaching faculty, we get quite a bit larger pretty quickly.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you. Well, I don't see that Kim has given us extra context, but what I will do is encourage folks to reach out to Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Mackey if you have questions. There were only a couple more that actually came in, to be honest with you. Most of them are sort of comments. They appreciate your experience and what you've shared today. And you know, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to reach out to both of them, one or both of them. And in the last few minutes we're together, I want to draw your attention to the chat pane. You will see that Misty, our technical facilitator, has added a link to a short evaluation. We'd like to ask you to take a few minutes right after this webinar closes to complete that. This is really important to maintaining our funding, and these evaluations are important in understanding you know, how you feel about the quality of the education and experiences you get from us. So they really are. We do look at them. Thank you so much for taking about 1 to 2 minutes to complete that. I'll also remind you that the PowerPoint slides are available on the website where you registered, where the webinar is listed. You will be able to request a certificate of completion, and you will also be able to request the CEs. The on-demand recording will be made available there as soon as it is up, and we will follow up with you with a follow-up email letting you know some of the, just wrapping up the details of what we just talked about. And also I would say that if you decide you'd like to listen to this again or share it with someone else once the on-demand is ready, we would love for you to complete the evaluation of from the on-demand recording. You can also request your continuing education credits after reviewing the on-demand learning. And with that, I want to just remind you that you're welcome to contact me if you want more information about SBIRT and you have some particular needs or burning questions. I encourage you to reach out to me. And also I'd like to just say thank you all for attending, and particularly to Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Mackey for sharing your experiences today. And we look forward to learning more about what you're doing over the remaining months of your project, and we look forward to learning about the outcomes of your work. And so thank you both. Appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And I'll thank everyone and say I hope you have a great afternoon.